Louisville, national champions, 1980.
The Cardinals have won the national championship. 75th NCAA college basketball champions.
Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good evening despite some disappointment earlier today. Welcome back to an emergency episode of the Third Banner Pod. I am Kyle, and I'm joined by Patrick and Connor, and we all know why we're here. We don't need to beat around the bush. We are here. We probably would not be on if we would have beat Depaul. The only way you come on after a game against Depaul is if you lose to Depaul, because otherwise it's not as noteworthy. So we've got a lot to talk about tonight. The future of Coach Kenny Payne, I believe, is very much a question of when, not if, and we're going to get into that. That being said, Patrick, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I mean, disappointing day for Cardinal sports, although, basketball doesn't really disappoint me anymore. It's just there.
It's just there.
Sad to see the volleyball ladies lose. We need Waltz to save the weekend tomorrow, but I think we got our answer on. Well, we've had our answer, but we know that KP is the bottom of the barrel at this point, man. You can't beat a horrible DePaul team, then I'm not sure what you can do.
Also, yeah, I want to let y'all know Connor. The reason Connor's not on here, like picture-wise, is he's driving, so that's why it's just a black screen. But Connor, what do you think?
So here's the funny thing: like, if you look at DePaul's last coaching search came down between Kenny Payne and Patrick Stuttlefield, and look what happened. They hired the right guy to play against the guy that they didn't hire, and look who won. It just it doesn't make sense to me anymore. Like I don't get it. And I don't know if you read Eric Crawford's article after the game, but he used Coach Snellenberger's line. He said the only variable is time to see when Kenny gets fired.
Yeah, I think we're all on that page. I personally think after a game like this, I don't know. Like people say, well, what would be the point in a midseason firing? Well, let me say what I think should happen, and people are free to agree or disagree with me on this point. I think what you need to do is you need to get both parties together and talk about a renegotiated buyout, which I think is, by the way, I think back channels have already happened for that. Whether people agree or disagree, I know some people, there's some camps that say no conversations at all have happened. I have reason to believe that representatives from both sides have had preliminary conversations in the past about this very thing. The reason I think it needs to happen now is because, like, let's say, yeah, you can wait until the end of March and he gets his full buyout, which would, I think, beginning of April or last day of March, goes down a couple $1 million. I think it goes down to $6 million. Don't quote me on that. I don't have the numbers.
Yeah, it goes from 8 to 6.
8 to 6. So at the very least, maybe you renegotiate now the 6 and get your 6 now. If not, maybe less. I don't know if they'd be willing to take less, but at the very least, try to renegotiate the 6 and just go ahead and do it now. And the reason is because you don't want a sitting head coach for another 2.5 months that it's not going to work. I used this analogy on the last pod. When you file for divorce, the last thing you want to do, because neither one of you have a place to live, is live with your future ex-wife for another 2.5 months. You don't want to do it. You got to tiptoe around the house. Oh, how about I go into the kitchen and I'll cook my food from about 6 to 7 p.m. and then you can come in from about 7:30 to 8:30 and you can have your, oh no, I want my dinner earlier than that. Well, no, that's not going to work. And it's just awkward. And then who gets to sleep on the couch? Who sleeps in the master bedroom? Does it switch every other day? We don't want to think about these things. It's awkward. That's Louisville basketball and Kenny Payne right now. It's a separated it's a separated group where you're still coaching these guys, but you know what's coming. So you know what? A loss like today, just like it makes it more awkward to keep going and pretending like, hey, we're just gonna gut through the entire season and continue this mess.
No. Well, and let me be honest with you. You know, and I'll preface this by saying I'm not sure it'll get better with an assistant coach, but watching this for the past year and a half, you're doing the kids a disservice to let this guy continue to coach them. I mean, you look at somebody like Trey White, who I watched film of, I watched games at USC. You know, as a freshman, you could see talent. He wasn't a great dribbler, but he was his first step was quick. He had a mid-range game. This year, I mean, he looks less athletic than he did last year. It looks more out of shape. I mean, I just think the kids are not getting what they should be getting at a big-time college university. And, you know, I've said this before, maybe not on here, but if you're playing at the University of Louisville, I'm sure everybody wants to make the NBA, but most of our players should have a chance to go play professionally overseas. And a lot of these guys on this team, they might not be talented enough to play in the NBA, but they have talent enough to go play overseas at some point. And when you're getting coached and you're not working on fundamentals and you can't even figure out how to attack a zone defense, you're hurting these kids' future. And I know people want to say, hey, you know, he's building them into men. Well, that's great, but you know, he's hurting their bank accounts is what I think he's doing.
Well, and you know, watching Kenny Payne against a zone is like watching an Amish person trying to shop at Best Buy for the first time. Like, it's an electronics store. They have no clue what they're doing. They're a deer in headlights. That's exactly what it looked like to me today. Damian, Couch House, Anthony, Josh, good to see you guys in here. Welcome, everybody. I'm sure more people start to file in as we continue on.
And Kenny's been like an assistant or a head coach for how long? I don't know how many years, and he can't figure out his own. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I get it. They don't run zone in the NBA. But you coached with Cal for how long, and how many times did you see a zone in college? It is not that hard to break a zone. And they're going to make us shoot out. And they're going to make us shoot because we can't shoot.
Well, Jules says these kids came for Kenny. If he leaves, they will quit and or leave. It will be a full reset again. You know what? And I took some heat on this on Twitter today because I just had a bad feeling today. I fired off a couple of tweets, and I know I got some cryptic responses from one name in particular. I got a couple shots, and that's fine. Hey, I'm here for it, man. They can think whatever they want, but my point was, hey, I'm so sick and tired of hearing excuses this year, and that you can flip your roster in one portal off season. People don't want to hear that. People want to hear it's going to take 3-4 years to rebuild this thing. No. Oh, no. Not in the transfer portal era. Not going to happen. So I don't want to hear it because, like, I see too many guys, Jerome Tang, Dennis Gates, TJ Otzelberger, plenty of coaches that take their roster. Must does it every single year. They take their rosters and they flip them in the offseason. John Calipari did it before the freaking portal existed. And I know he had Nike backing him back in the pre-NIL era. But the point is, in NIL era, in the transfer portal, you allocate your resources. And if you have the resources available to get big names, you can bring them in here, flip your roster in one offseason. I'm just asking that we make the tournament next year. Like, that's my goal. That was my goal this year. Because people act like that. We've got so much battered woman syndrome, Stockholm syndrome, which Stockholm syndrome is not the perfect term for what it is. It's more like learned helplessness, where when things are so bad for so long, you just think that's the way it is. When people start talking about making a tournament, people act like that's utter blasphemy and that we should not be in a place to make the tournament this year. You're telling me that we cannot be one of the 68 best teams in the NCAA this year with that type of roster? the roster has its deficiencies, which are because of the coaching staff and the kind of, roster construction they go for. They don't land enough guards, but it is what it is. It's their choice. Even with the roster as it stands today, we should absolutely be one of the 68 best teams in college basketball. That is not asking for a whole lot. And I'm sick and tired of hearing that it's blasphemy to expect us to make an NCAA tournament. Like, there's teams that are terrible that will be in the NCAA tournament this year.
Yeah. Well, and
hell, Virginia Tech might be in the tournament.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I don't know. After watching them play us, I can't imagine.
I don't know about that one, but they might. I mean, they got a better chance than us.
I do want to say too, of course, these kids are going to say they're here to play for Kenny and stuff. Why wouldn't you? That they have more PR smarts than Kenny does. But let's look at who stayed around from last year to see who wants to play for Kenny. All right, you've got JJ stays around. Well,
didn't play today.
He didn't play today. He's from Louisville. He's not. He's a senior. He doesn't really have a pro future. So you understand that. BHH stays around because he transferred here, and to transfer out, he'd have to wait another year. Other than that,
Caleb Glenn's a Louisville guy.
Well, and those are freshmen that came here. I'm talking about guys who played 1 year for Kenny and stayed. And those are really the only two guys, I think, on the team, other than
You're forgetting about Zan Payne, brother.
Well, I said walk-ons that stayed here. And I would guarantee you that it's not going to happen. But if Kenny Payne was the coach next year, the only people that would stay would be the people that had to stay because they couldn't transfer again. I would guarantee it. None of the freshmen would be here next year if Kenny Payne stayed. And they might not be here anyway, but I'm just saying if Kenny Payne was here for a third year, there'd be a mass exodus. Because,
and my guess is a guy like Jerome Tang, for example, or Mick Cronin. I'm just throwing names out. I'm not saying anybody that's going to get the job or that wants the job. I'm not getting in. We'll get into that. That will happen. But for now, I'm just saying, like, there are guys that would come in here and look at the roster and go, well, I wouldn't have recruited some of these guys to begin with. And the roster construction, they're going to look at the way it's constructed. And a lot of the people that were criticized for saying, we don't recruit enough guards. We just seem to recruit a bunch of small forwards and just jam them in every position. And then we have guys like, Karan Davis, who, without his mysterious thing that we can get into in a little bit, we kind of wonder why we recruit him anyway. He didn't even have a recruiting profile, and he was at the lowest level of JUCO competition and struggled, by the way, at that level to an extent with turnovers, assists, decision-making, poor defense. He was just a volume scorer there at that level. We bring him on. We bring the kid in, Danilo from Miami. We all wondered about that one. What's he done? Like, those are guys that, like, okay, yeah, we might lose them, and we're going to lose Karan anyway, it looks like. But we're going to lose some of these guys. But, I mean, what coach is going to come in here and say, I want to keep all these guys? They're not going to do that anyway. So I'm not too worried about that. And when I look at today, like, I'm looking at this box score with Depaul here. Depaul's a really bad basketball team. There's no bones about it. And they really dominated this game for the most part. Now, the first 15 minutes of the first half, it was like both teams. It was just ugly basketball both ways around. All of a sudden, Depaul switches his own. And, of course, like I said, it's like Kenny Payne's an Amish person shopping at a Best Buy. Doesn't know what in the world he's doing. So here we are. We get down like 16 points at halftime. And we never really recovered fully. The only thing that kept us kind of in the game, when I look at this box score, was Depaul had 17 turnovers to our 10. And a lot of that's because they just kept dribbling into the coffin corner every time. I didn't know what they were doing. I thought they were trying to get the game away at one point because they just kept going to the coffin corner and just standing there with the ball until they either dribbled it off their own knee out of bounds or just handed it off to our player. I saw that play a million times. So then our points off turnovers were reversed. We had 17 points off turnovers. They had 10. But everything else, fast break points, we had 32 to their – paint points. I'm sorry. We had 32, they're 28. Everything else they owned. Shooting percentage. They shot 51% from the field. So all week we heard DePaul has the worst defense in the Power Six. Well, no, apparently we do, because we shot 39%. They shot 51. We shot 26% from three. They shot 35%, which actually a little under average for them. We shot 6 less free throws. I mean, they really did. They controlled the tempo of the game. They hit more shots than we hit, and they played better defense, which is the craziest part.
Yeah. Well, and so Stubblefield. I mean, he might be, if Kenny Payne is 1A in the Power Six of worst coaches. I mean, Stubblefield's right below him.
Well, there was rumors he was getting fired if he lost this game.
At 1B, which for one shows you that whoever's running DePaul needs to be let go immediately in that athletic department. If they came down to Kenny Payne and Tony Stubblefield to run.
Hey, you want to know, Pat? You want to know why they came down to Tony and Kenny?
Nobody else was interested. I mean, that would be the only reason that would make
their
sense.
Their AD was a sport admin at UK before he went to DePaul.
Well,
he was sport admin for basketball.
Well, so not an excuse. Should be let go immediately if I was a DePaul fan. But number two, I mean, if watching these two teams play, you could tell the coaching was bad. And if Kenny can't keep up with a guy like Tony Stubblefield, I mean, the guy, I mean, we knew this, but it's a lost cause at this point. And I tend to wonder, you know, I'm sure Nike will hook him up, but who would even want Kenny Payne as an assistant coach at this point?
Well, I hope for his sake he can be an assistant coach, because he wasn't a bad one. He wasn't a bad assistant coach. That was always my skepticism bringing him here was, you know how hard of a job this is to learn in today's climate with the NIL and transfer portal just becoming a thing right when he became a head coach, and he didn't earn any of his head coaching experience from lower schools before he got to us. That's a hell of an ask. And so some of this I still don't blame him for to this day. But one thing, like, and I've heard a lot of people talk, and I know that people that have been like very loyal to his corner, thinking he can turn this around much longer than I did, for example. One of the big arguments I still hear about the shoes and switching to Nike as a big part of the problem here. This is not pre-NIL when shoe companies completely drove the bus for landing guys. There's absolutely a time and a place where Nike had like a stranglehold on everything. And Coach Pitino even called it out one time in a press conference after, I believe it was Antonio Blakeney for LSU. He committed to us and just turned right around, decommitted, went there. But those days, like, listen, man, like, yeah, Nike's an asset to have in NIL, but they're not the only big fish in the game anymore. Otherwise, how in the world are Kansas, Indiana, Miami, schools like that, how in the world are they recruiting so well and landing these 5-star guys if there's not other resources at your disposal? The problem is it has been this coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas Adidas School has been the best basketball program in the NIL era, probably.
Rutgers did get 2 5-stars, and the argument's going to be that they're getting it because they're switching to Nike. So, but I'm with you. I think they would have got them regardless. Go ahead, Connor.
And if you look at it, like, really, Adidas and Under Armour are the two big like NIL like shoe brands. Those are the only ones that are doing like legitimate NIL like commercials, anything like that. So like the Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, throw in shoe company X here argument is not a good argument anymore, because Adidas is doing everything they need to do in the NIL space.
Well, and here's my other issue, Connor, is we were told, I never bought this, but we were told that Kenny Payne's Nike connections were just going to waltz on over here to an Adidas school, and because they loved Kenny Payne. And it sounds ridiculous now. It sounds absolutely blasphemous, but that is exactly what a lot of people said was that, hey, he's going to bridge the gap between Nike and Adidas, which I'm like, how's that going to work? Business is business. That's your competitor. He's not going to bridge shit when it comes to that. If our plan is for, just a bridge, like, okay, that's why we brought Kenny Payne, because he's got his Nike connects and they're just going to help him because they love him so much. Well, I never bought that for a second. I mean, it's not hindsight speaking at all. It's just sometimes you got to use your head a little bit, man. It's like you can't turn around now and go, well, the problem is we don't have Nike in our back pocket. Well, no, the problem is we went after the wrong guy with the wrong connections. I mean, let me give a timeline real quick of problems, because people say it's just this, how's anybody ever going to come to Louisville and succeed? We had all this stuff happen. I'm not buying it. And here's why I'm not buying it. The day after Kenny Payne's press conference, which was a good press conference, I was actually like, my skepticism lowered. I thought, man, I'm actually kind of feeling this. It was a special moment, a lot of old familiar faces. The day after that, he goes to New York, went to New York for over a week, didn't hear a thing while he was gone, just ghosted like a bad Tinder date, just completely ghosted. And he swiped left on Louisville. Day 2, swiped left, did not swipe right, totally ghosted us. Kamari lands committed to us 2 weeks out. I haven't heard from Coach Payne, but I can't wait to hear from him. Once he does reach out to me, I'm like, looking at my watch, like, it's been 2 weeks. Where's he at? What's he doing?
The Davis brothers didn't hear. I mean, everybody.
Nobody heard anything except the guys that were at that press conference. So then we hear about the staff. He's going to compile the best staff in the country, the best staff, which this is before of his crazy quote at the end of the year. This is when people were like, he's going to have a juggernaut staff, which Nolan Smith was a really good ad. But we were told, how many names were we told? We were told Jarence Howard. Yeah. We were told Yasser Roseman. We were told all these guys were coming, and we were going to have the premier staff. Well, guess what? On April 27th, 6 weeks after Coach Kenny Payne took his job, he finally hired his third assistant, Josh Jameson, out of Oregon, a guy who had no direct assistant coach experience at all at that level.
Get me going on Jameson, man.
And so the Danny Manning hire at the time, I actually thought was going to be good. But again, that was like 3 weeks after he took the job. And Josh Jameson, Nolan, it took a while because he was in a tournament. That's fine. But we hired our last coach on April 27th. June 28th, a full over three and a half months after Kenny Payne took the job, we finally find a strength and conditioning coach. The end of June. I mean, this was always, and this is just the things that you can look at and look at hard, concrete timelines. This isn't just the things. I mean, some of us have heard some very egregious things behind the scenes, which will probably come out one way or another after he's still the coach. But that's what's pissed some of us off. And that's where, like, you can't talk about that stuff because people just say you're making it up or you don't want the staff to succeed. But these are concrete things. Going off to New York, not contacting anybody, ghosting like a bad Tinder date. Josh Jameson hired 6 weeks after he took the job. June 28th, we get a strength and conditioning coach. And the portal recruiting was just so slow. We hear about this guy's not good enough. That guy's not good enough. Elijah Fisher, who barbecued us today like a middle-aged dad out in his backyard. He just completely smoked us. And we what do we hear? We heard, we're going to go watch Elijah Fisher play. And what happened? He cooked us today. We were told, Coach Payne doesn't think he's good enough to play here. Yet he can go to the Blue Siemens and beat us by – they killed us today. I mean, the score doesn't even indicate how bad they beat us today, man.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about strength and conditioning, man. Again, this guy, and I don't want to – listen, I could not tell anybody how to go into a gym and get any results. I'm not an expert, but the strength and conditioning guy comes here and the first thing we see is Sidney Curry out on the court, ballooned compared to his last year under Chris Mack, where we thought, man, this guy could have something. He's turned into a freak out there, and he comes back and he looks like the Sidney Curry that first showed up on campus. And if you've got a strength and conditioning program and a strength and conditioning coach and a head coach that holds people accountable, that stuff does not happen, man. That stuff does not happen.
Yeah, there's too many question marks. There's too many things like, okay, I talked about Churchill Boss played today. He didn't do very much at all. But in the middle of the peak of portal season, you're hearing this guy's entering a portal, that guy. I'm like, man, these are 5-star impact player guards. The kind of guys that other people say, we can't flip a roster in one off season. It's impossible. Hardly anybody does it. Yet I'm sitting here watching all these guys enter the portal. I'm like, I wonder what Coach Payne, if he's going to get on the phone with them. Nope, he's out of phone range. You know why? Because he took a camel over to Senegal or wherever the hell he went. In the middle of portal season, he's riding a camel going to see Churchill Boss and didn't even he just went all the way there to say, hey, man, I just want to meet you in person, shake your hand, look you in the eye and say you are not good enough to play for Louisville basketball. And I want to take like 3 days out of the portal period to let you know that. Then he marches his butt and gets his ass back on the camel, goes back, rides the camel back to the airport, brings his ass back here, and we don't have any portal player. We got 2 decent portal players in Trey White and Sky Clark and a bunch of dudes named Bob. And, then all of a sudden the Danilo thing comes out of nowhere. And there was no, how like on Twitter, the coaches are like, they do the eyeballs or, another big moment for the Ville, great day to be, they have their little catchphrases. Our coaching staff is just completely gone, non-existent about the whole damn thing. And all of a sudden we get to hear breaking news. A guy none of us have heard of is joining the team. And I mean, I'm on it today, man. I'm just on a rant because like, this has got to change, man. This has to end.
Yeah.
This has to end. And
to your point about, no offense to the kid, but the white guy from Miami.
Danilo.
Yeah. We'll take him, but we'll tell Davion McKnight, hey man, we just don't got a spot for you.
There's another one, Davion McKnight. Yeah, we hear we can't flip a roster, but the truth is we don't know how to replace guys on the roster with a correct construction of a roster. And I don't even have to be a head coach or a coach, period. I'm just a dude on an upstart pod. And I'm just saying, I knew looking at this roster that we missed out on some dudes we could have had and that is poorly constructed. And we had people who are basketball players telling us, you don't know what you're talking about because you never played ball. Well, here we are. What's the problem? If it's not the way this roster is constructed and the coaching, what's the problem here? Yeah. And it's not that we need to switch to Nike. That's not it. So I guess I'm just like, it's like all this built up frustration. You hear all the time. You just don't want them to succeed. You're just a bad fan. And like, I'm just here tonight. Like I've listened to all these shows and I respect a lot of people, even the ones I disagree with at times, but this is the Third Banner pod. I'm going to let y'all know how I feel on our show.
Yeah. Well, and you know, we talk about on-court stuff, which is the most important. But, you know, that doesn't even hit on some of this off-court stuff. I mean, Kenny Payne came here. He preached community. He preached, you know, bringing, you know, people back to the young, bringing the community back to the program, this and that. But I don't see Kenny Payne out in the community. He doesn't interact with fans in the off season. He doesn't, you know, the PR issues he has during his press conferences are like astronomical. You know, by the team not being good, that the city of Louisville is suffering. I mean, those businesses on, you know, Main Street and downtown, you know, they rely on 18,000 people going to the Yum Center every Tuesday, Wednesday night, every Saturday afternoon, you know, and Kenny Payne has not done anything to help this community come back together and support the University of Louisville basketball team. Because when you're not out in the community, when you're not interacting with fans, and when you're losing basketball games, you're not accomplishing that. And I can't help you accomplish that when you will not make me feel like part of the university, part of the team, man. You have not done that. And so we can talk about off-court stuff. We can talk about on-court stuff. There's just not anything you can take from this 1.5 years that has been positive, man. There are very, very few positives.
And insulating yourself from everybody is not a sound strategy. It is something I worried about, because I remember when I first heard rumors in December of the year before he ended up getting hired in March, we had heard Kenny Payne's the guy everybody wants. They're going to push. As soon as this job opens up, they're going to push for Coach Kenny Payne. And then, I think around that time, not too long after that, was when Mike Pegues took over. And so, of course, everybody turns their attention. And it's like, it's going to be Coach Kenny Payne, whether some of you guys like it or not. Get over it. It's only him. He's the one. He's the only one that can turn our program around. It's Coach Payne or bust. If you like anybody else and you push anybody else, you don't have the best interest in Louisville sports at heart. I heard that one multiple times by multiple people. It made me think I'd lost my damn mind, because my only reason for not wanting him were all the things that ended up coming to fruition. And I don't mean that as I told you so either. I've been wrong about plenty of things. But this was just something where, like, it was like you couldn't even speak your mind about it, because it was just believed to be such utter blasphemy. And I cannot wrap my mind around the logic of, like, this is the only option we had. It had to be this way, man. It just pisses me off. And there was another point I was going to make, and I'm just so wound up. I don't remember what it was now, but.
Well, I mean, to your point there, how it kind of was shoved down fans' throats. And let me tell you my type of thinking when this happened. When Kenny Payne's name first came up, my initial thinking was, hey, 3 or 4 years ago, this guy's name came up and everybody was like, that would be one of the worst decisions we could possibly make. Mm-hmm. And then his name comes up again after Mac leaves.
And nothing changed.
What
he went to the NBA as an assistant, but like, okay.
That's about it. And listen, man, I fell victim to it. I had questions and it was shoved. This is going to work. I mean, people who know the program and stuff were on board saying, hey, believe me, this is going to work. This guy knows what he's doing. He's going to get us NBA players. His development of big men is talked about across the NBA, all this stuff. And I'll admit, I bought into it. I was skeptical at first, but when it continues to get shoved down your throat, you eventually say, hey, these guys that are talking, they know basketball. They got to know what they're talking about. And it's almost like it was this big charade, to get people on board, which is fine. But then the man doesn't even try to do things to keep the people on board. There you go.
I know what I was going to say now. So one of my worries before he ever got hired, which was an underrated thing that a lot of people probably didn't think. I searched for things whenever his name got rumored in like December before when we still have Chris Mack and Mike McKee's coaching. Like, we heard all these things about Kenny Payne's going to be the guy. Coach Payne's going to be the guy. I start looking up whatever I can find out about this guy. He was a complete ghost online. You know how hard it is to not have any profile? I found one Kenny Payne interview that was like a minute and 15 seconds long, where he was sitting in a gym at a recruiting event talking about how maybe one day he might want to become a head coach. And there just wasn't a whole lot to it. And that was all there was. No social media, no anything. So my point is, how in the world can you go from being that type of person, which is fine to be, to being the center of this metropolitan area? The Louisville metro area is a big area. It's a diehard basketball area, one of the biggest, if not the biggest in the entire country, and you're going to be our head coach of a top 8 program of all time. Sliding. We were like top 6, but we're sliding. I mean, let's just be real there. UConn's moving up. We're moving down among other schools. But that being said, how are you going to take on that responsibility and be in front of everybody? And I just never understood it. So when I look at something like the Karan Davis thing, for example, he tells everybody he didn't even know Karan Davis was at the game. That means only one of 2 things is possible. Either A, you were so insulated and walled off from everything around you that it never got back to you that he was at the game, or B, you're just completely making that up, which I'm not going to say which one I think it is, but I will say, without giving it fully away, I find it very difficult to believe that not a single assistant on his team, not a single person around that program noticed the pictures that were floating around at the very least on the internet with Karan Davis at the game. I find that very hard to believe, but let's just say it's true. He really didn't know he was at the game. Well, then, my God, has anybody even talked to this man at all? Because that's your basketball player. That's your player, and he's at the game, and he's not in trouble, but he's not out there, and that whole thing's weird. You know, we hear all these things, and it gets debunked, and then what do you know? Coincidental timing. He's never to be seen again except when he's out at the game buying a ticket and sitting behind the bench on his phone, and you don't even know he's there. So the whole thing, like, there's just too many things that don't add up where you have to just look at this. And okay, who said it earlier? Say No More said, well, he said something about, like, it doesn't do any good to fire him now. He definitely has to go, but firing now. Okay, here's where I disagree. I think you can negotiate the buyout down to what he would make as of April 1st when the buyout drops. I think you can do that now. The problem I have is if you don't do that, and I said it earlier, so for people that were already in here, I'm going to repeat myself. You don't live with a separated spouse for 2 or 3 months in the same house and just tiptoe around each other. It's awkward. We all know where this is going. So we can either wait until we get to April and then the buyout drops to $6 million, or we can go ahead and sit down now and say, look, we both know where this is going. Let's just go ahead and do it now. Let's save face. Because here's the alternative. It's going to get ugly, and I'm not saying that as a threat on my end. I know how this stuff works. All of a sudden, you're going to start hearing all these stories leak out every single day. I heard this player got in a fight with that player. I heard, this happened at practice the other day. Do you really? And I'm not, like I said, I don't want that to happen. We're not going to condone that on here. It's going to happen, though. We saw it happen when Chris Mack was there, and he was obviously a dead man walking. We saw all these stories break out. Do y'all really want to go that route? Do we really want to end the year that way? I don't.
Right.
We're going to stink either way. But I'd rather stink knowing that, hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel. The staff, we've moved on from the head coach, and let's just support the players at that point. We all know what's coming. But if you leave them in there as a dead man walking for another 2.5 months, you're going to do more harm than good. I stand by that.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you. And there's a couple things here. I mean, for one, I wasn't alive to see Kenny Payne play basketball, but he's a beloved player, in our university's history. He's part of a championship team, lives up there with some of the greats that put on the uniform. And so you don't want things to get ugly, because this is a man that people loved and respected, and they should continue to love and respect.
They should, but we both know they won't if he stays
there. Right.
It's going to get ugly.
If it gets ugly, you tarnish that. Number two, all right, as I said earlier, man, the engagement for our fans. Now the biggest engagement is winning basketball games. Don't get me wrong. But even outside of that, there's nothing there. And that's not all Kenny's fault. The athletic department could do a better job. But if you replace Kenny, I think you've got more you can change the narrative a little bit and get fans more involved in the program. You can tell that assistant coach that's going to take over, hey man, we're giving you a raise. One of the things we want you to do is get out, and talk to
Engage
fans
with the
once a week.
fans.
Yeah,
because that would be an upgrade alone if somebody actually communicates with us.
Right, and so there's stuff you can do once you get that divorce, as you're saying, Kyle, over with, and that awkwardness out of the room, that I think can be beneficial for the future of this program. Is it going to be beneficial in our, next coaching search? Probably not. But that's not what we're talking about. There's other benefits that the program can get from getting out of this awkward situation, because both sides know it's coming.
Yes, that's it. It's like, are we really going to sit? And to that point, like, I think everybody knows this year there is no like great answer. Like, we're not saying like, hey, if you move on from Coach Kenny Payne, all of a sudden we're going to kick ass. We might make the tournament and we're just going to start rolling sellouts every night. Like, none of us are talking about that. We are talking about ending something that's awkward and going to happen anyway, on the terms it would happen if we extended out, and then just giving a little bit of hope, maybe reach out, give an olive branch to the fans, and you will see an uptick in attendance if you do it. Not a great one. We're still not going to be where we used to be. We understand that takes time.
I know that you all listened to Ethan after the game, and like, I don't know if you all mentioned this while I was on the phone or not, but like, if you tell Mark Lieberman and Peyton they're going to come in and be interim coaches and tell everybody else to get out, can you imagine the uptick in fans that we will have at games, which will create more revenue for the athletic department? And
I don't know if they'd be interested in doing that, but I mean, hypothetically, it'd be great.
But but that would help offset how much we've already lost.
Yeah. That's that's kind of, to me, that is kind of the fairy tale. I mean, you're talking about Peyton Siva, who's just opened up a gym and a new business. You're talking about Mark Lieberman, who has a day-to-day job to get someone, as passionate as they are about U of L basketball, to say, hey, I'm going to quit what I'm doing right now to come and take over for a few months.
Like a month or 2 months. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard sell. Maybe they're interested, but that's kind of the fairy tale. But to me, regardless, if it's Danny Manning, if it's Nolan Smith, don't get me started on Oregon coach number 2. But, if it's one of the other two, there's still positives to be gained from that. And yes, the fairy tale of Mark Lieberman and Peyton Siva would be awesome and would probably create the most excitement that, you could possibly create out of the situation. But, again, I go back to what Kyle's been preaching on here for, since the start of the show, and just getting rid of the awkwardness is what has to be done, I think. And as a fan, am I going to be totally disappointed if we wait till March, April to do this? No, it's not the end of the world. But, you also have people who are going to think the longer this goes on, they're going to be nervous that it is year 3 coming, and so you can kind of get rid of that angst amongst your fan base too. Not that should be a main reason to do it early.
No, but I see what you're saying. I think the biggest thing now, too, speaking of year, like, I'm not worried about a year 3, especially after today. I think there's a large contingent. I mean, we've stunk for a while. I'm not denying that. We've just had a descent downward ever since the whole Patino Adidas thing and the fallout from that. And I'm not going to say that there hasn't been a ripple effect that's affected up until, I'd say, right before last year, maybe during last year, until it was officially we won the appeal with the IARP. I say won. We didn't have additional sanctions, basically. So that's a win to me. It's not technically a win in court, but you know what I'm saying. So up until that moment, you can argue how much it impacted us versus how much of it was on the staff. I will say there's no doubt it did some. We're past all that now, but I think the fan base just feels completely beat up. I hear so many people say, nobody would want to come here. Nobody good's coming to Louisville to be the coach here. We don't have any money. Why would anybody want to leave their job to come here? Bullshit. We are still a top 10 program of all time, and the money is not as bad as people think. Now, can we just shell out Elon Musk money to anybody we want? No, we're not a Texas. We're not like Texas A&M football, who bought out Jimbo Fisher for like, what was it, 70-something million, some crazy blasphemous number. No, we're not that. But my God, we're not like bankrupt either. And people do want to come here. Good coaches do have interest in coming here. I really think, and I don't know how we could swing it, but I do think Mick Cronin is interested, and I'm very comfortable saying that. I've been saying it to you guys, like Pat and a few others from the pod. I've been saying it for like 3 or 4 weeks. Probably 3 weeks now. Mick Cronin, the name keeps coming up. It keeps on coming up. And it's coming from his camp. It's not coming from fans. It's not coming from us. Now, his buyout is astronomical. That is a problem, and I don't know how that gets dealt with. That's beyond me, just little old me on this pod. But I do know he's interested in coming here. I do think Jerome Tang Gang, would be interested in coming here. And I know there's some, hesitancy. Well, he had one good year. Could he continue that? Is it a fluke or not? I don't know the answer to that. He's 8-2 right now, had a good win at LSU. And I know that he would crush the transfer portal. I have no doubt about that. This whole sitting on the sidelines watching Eric Musselman offer everyone and their mother that enters a portal within 5 seconds of them getting in the portal and then wondering when the hell we're going to offer them. That wouldn't happen anymore under Jerome Tang. We would absolutely be a player in the portal at the very least. Those guys are guys on the list. Trilly Donovan came out with his list. Trilly Donovan doesn't throw random people on a list. If he's got them on the list, there's a reason why he's got them on the list, and it's not just to give us false hopes. It's because there is some sort of interest there. Yep. Mick Cronin's on that list. Jerome Tang's on that list. Dusty May's on that list. We've got some guys on that list. Let's stop acting like our program sucks. It doesn't.
Yeah,
and here's another thought. Here's another thought. Eric Musselman only has a $2 million buyout.
Well, and I don't know if we can land Muzz. I will say Muzz, with the amount of NIL companies backing him in Arkansas, that dude has it absolutely made. Now, Musselman's a radical dude. He's the kind of dude that can just pack up overnight and decide he wants to take his shirt off on the airplane on the way to Louisville to take the job. He's a crazy-ass dude. He's kind of reminds me of me in high school, except I kind of grew up a little bit, still a little immature at times. He's like high school, college frat boy Kyle. He's crazy as hell, unpredictable, no idea what the hell he would do. That being said, I just don't imagine with his connections and the way he's got them rolling down there. I think he would come here and be like, think he could just get anybody with bukus of NIL money and find out like, oh shit, like I really had it made at Arkansas.
I mean, unfortunately, the Walton we don't have the Waltons backing us like they do.
JB Hunt, or there's a lot of
Tyson.
Well, and I also think as we talk about the landscape and potential coaches that come here, listen, it's not about Louisville will always be able to, I think, unless we continue this downward spiral, we should always be able to attract the top coaches out there. The interesting thing about where we are in today's college game is there's not a ton of sure thing coaches out there. I mean, Bill Self is a Hall of Famer, obviously. He's the number one coach in the country, in my opinion, at this point. But he's not leaving Kansas. Rick Pitino obviously is not coming back here.
I get so annoyed when people say to bring Rick Pitino. First off, the man's damn near 70. Yeah, I'd love to have him back. But, if we can't even get Rick Pitino to come back for like a ceremony. What makes you think he's going to be the head coach?
Yeah. I mean, that's not happening. You know, Mark Few's up there. He's not leaving Gonzaga.
Mark Few will never leave Gonzaga.
Izzo's old and is not leaving Michigan State. So then you start looking at, you know, and those are the goats of the current era now that, you know, your Krzyzewskis and Roy Williams are gone. So then you start looking at the next group. And there's not sure things in the next group. There's Matt Painters who can't win in the tournament, you know. But you also have your Shaka Smarts in that group. You have your
sensational Shaka tie.
Mick Cronin's in that group, you know. So those are guys that, you know, it sounds like we're contacting that are at least, you know, interested in hearing from us. And then below that, you've got, you know, your up and comers like your Tang, your May, and stuff like that. So you look at who we can get, and in the current landscape, you're still getting, you know, I don't want to say the who's who, but the next line of coaches are interested in coming here.
Well, and so then you got some that I think just are unrealistic. Like people still talk about Jay Wright. Jay Wright left the game at the place he loved to be at because of the way it changed. I see no reason why he would just jump back in for us. I know he worked with Josh Hurd in the past, but is him working with Josh Hurd, who's not the AD, then enough to bring him here? I think that'd be a hell of a haul. I see Billy Donovan come up a lot, and he's an NBA coach. He's not coming back, and he's a Rick Pitino guy through and through. And before somebody says, well, so is Mick Cronin. Mick Cronin coached for a couple of years under Rick Pitino. That's not where his roots come from. And that connection is not as strong as Billy Donovan, as Kevin Willard, as some of those other Pitino disciples. He kind of goes his own way. And that is not connected. So the reasoning behind Cronin being interested would not be the same as Billy Donovan not being interested. I don't think Billy Donovan's ever going to come back to college. Right. But if he does, I definitely don't think it would be without the approval of Coach Pitino, who I don't think he would give him his blessing to come here. And maybe I'm wrong, but I have no reason to believe that would be the case, because you see how these coaches like Kevin Willard have acted about us since they left and have come back to play us. There's some bitterness there, and that comes because there's still bitterness there for Coach Pitino, rightfully so, I might add, but I don't think that's a chance. Chris Beard, I'm going to bring him up. Somebody in our pod comments, if you watch this, somebody got wound up because I said I didn't think our university had the balls to hire anybody with a background at all, even the potential of a background. I'm saying it again on this pod. I don't think they have the balls to hire anybody that has any sort of dust up. And that doesn't mean that we should hire Chris Beard. That doesn't mean, I don't know exactly what happened there. I've seen the police report. Doesn't look great. But I also know there's, that story was the end of that story was never determined. And I know that Ole Miss hired him. I do know that. And so I would like us to at least look into his background before we just say, hell no, at the first whisper of something. And when I said that, I said, I don't think we have the ball. I wasn't just talking about Chris Beard. I was talking about, we wouldn't look at Sean Miller because he's had a previous run-in with the NCAA, even though we're in the NIL era and all that stuff to me is moot now. We wouldn't talk to him. We wouldn't reach out to a guy like Kelvin Sampson, even though he would never leave Houston. But we heard, we would never reach out, because I'm sick of hearing that crap. I'm sick of it. The Chris Beard thing aside, that's domestic violence. That's something you really need to dig deep. And if it happened, don't do it. Obviously, Ole Miss felt comfortable enough to hire him, though. So that's the only reason I said, hey, are we getting the whole story or not? So whoever that is, if they come back to this episode, I stand by what I said on that episode.
Let me pose this question. If in 5 years Chris Beard, has been clean and has, turned Ole Miss into a decent basketball program, and Cal hangs it up as at Kentucky. Who's the first coach that Kentucky's going to call?
They call Chris Beard. They 100%
Absolutely
call Chris
would.
Beard.
So you got to do the proper background checks on these guys.
And that's all I was saying.
You know.
I don't think we have the balls to even consider it. Is
Right.
all I was saying.
Yeah.
Not that we should, or not that I condone anything like that. I have no history of it, and I wouldn't tolerate being around it at all. But I also know that it wasn't, for whatever reason. Now, that person made a lot of assumptions. Well, when people I understand that. I actually work with the population that deals with that. I have to deal with that. But I'm also not guilty. I don't believe in guilty until proven innocent is all I'm saying. And I would like to at least know the rationale of Ole Miss giving it a chance. Is it really just that they want to win at all costs? Because they had Hugh Freeze and they had to get rid of him. You don't think that their administration was a bit hesitant to take that chance after that happened? I think they probably were, but they did it. So I'd at least like us to look at it. I mean, my God, why shut it down before you look at it is all I'm saying. I'm not saying we should bring him on. Only that the first, as soon as you hear his name, you're like, shouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. I think you really should look at it before you make that determination.
Here's another name that we could throw out there, but I don't know if he'll ever leave the West Coast because he's a Mark Few disciple. But what about Tommy Lloyd?
Oh man, if you could give me anybody in the country other than a Bill Self, something like that, he'd probably be number one on my list. But it sounds like from the limited research I've done, he's a West Coast guy, and I don't see him ever leaving the West Coast.
And that's why I said it, because he's a Mark Few guy, and Mark Few's guys never leave the West Coast, which is fine, but you at least have to make him say no.
Oh yeah, he'd be the first guy I called. What he has done at Arizona and watching them play. I mean, I think they might be the best team in the country this year. And I don't watch as much college basketball as I used to because I get depressed watching good teams play. But I mean, the games I've watched a couple of their games. They look like they may be the best team in the country. And since he's been there, they've been one of the top 10 teams in the country every year. So yeah, no, I mean, you definitely call him and say, hey, you got any interest in this? To see what he says. No doubt about that.
If I had to guess,
I mean, Mark Pope should be number one on the hot board. What do you mean?
That's a joke, by the way, for people that don't. That's an inside joke.
People are Googling Mark Pope.
People are going to go, oh, what? You're crazy, Connor. Mark Pope. That's an inside. But anyway, I think the main guys as of today, but this can all change by the time the end of March, beginning of April. You have an NCAA tournament. Things either happen or don't happen. Either we could go cold on somebody or they could go cold on us or a mutual, both of us, the same thing. I don't know. But as of today, I think the biggest names, you're looking at Jerome Tang, you're looking at Dusty May, and you're looking at Mick Cronin. And the Mick Cronin one's going to be tough because of that buyout. I think a lot would have to line up. But I don't care if this is on record. I have no doubt Mick Cronin is interested in coming back to Louisville. And I mean, I would assume we're interested. I actually don't know as much about the interest from us. I would assume we are. I just don't know if we're kind of looking at that buyout like, what the hell, man? Like, how in the world are we going to swing this? So I don't know. Those are the big three, though. I mean, once you get beyond that, I know Trilly put those three on his list as well. Trilly Donovan also put Porter Moser on there. I don't know. That's going to get mixed reactions. I mean, he has had success in multiple places, and he's had some tournament success for 2 years. But I don't think that style in Louisville, Kentucky, I don't know if that's a good fit. That's just my opinion.
He's also struggled at multiple places. I mean, he got fired from Southern Illinois, I mean, honestly, before his big Final Four run at Loyola, I mean, there wasn't many impressive seasons there.
Yeah, and I didn't think Oklahoma's been that impressive except this year, really.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, if you were like, hey, keep Kenny for year 3 or hire this guy, I'd hire him 10 times out of 10.
I'd hire him tomorrow. Like that's not the question. It's like, do we want to get back to where we're supposed to be, or do we just want to be 18-12 every year?
Well, and this is the most important. This is no exaggeration. This is the most crucial, not important. Important is not the right word. This is the most critical hire in the history of Louisville sports, and I'm not exaggerating, because our basketball program right now is on the brink of being in like a decade or longer downward spiral where we just can't get out of it. We've already been there for several years now because of all the scandals. The Chris Mack situation with the admin run-ins they had there, with the way, his guys were handled.
Yeah.
All of that stuff was a disaster. Obviously, this staff here not gone well at all on the court.
And that's a generation of fans,
we're a
man.
basketball school, but we are trending so far downward. So I do agree with people that are like, well, we haven't been what we used to be. I acknowledge that. I think we still have the ability to get it right this time and, redirect onto the path that we were once on. I think we can get back there. But I think if we mess this higher up and we spend another 2 or 3 years in the shitter, it just makes it that much more difficult. This is not going to be an easy hire. I don't envy Josh Hurt at all. It's already hard. But I do think that this is the most crucial hire because we have the chance to turn this around, but it needs to happen now.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've got some, it looks like we have some people being thrown in the chat here. Scott Drew from Couch House. Scott Drew's always an interesting
I'd take Scott
name.
Drew.
I'd take him. I just don't. He hasn't left yet, so I don't know why. I don't know what his buyout is. I think Baylor's a private university, so they don't release those numbers.
Well, and also Scott Drew would be, if Chris Beard is 1A, Scott Drew is 1B for the UK job whenever Cal leaves.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And also, it seems like there's, I don't know, I don't get into the religious stuff, but it seems like there's some type of religious principles that Scott Drew really loves about Baylor that has kind of kept him there.
It's a private Baptist school.
Yeah, and he seems very, very comfortable there. And not that I think Scott Drew is a bad coach. He's a very good coach, but you do wonder, if we're going to say Tang is such a great coach, how much did Tang help out Scott Drew while he was at Baylor?
Boys, I just got home, so I got to jump off here and eat dinner, but I'll keep listening and see what y'all come up with.
Awesome,
man.
All
right, Connor. Appreciate it, man.
And Anthony Eason out here says Kelvin Sampson. I'm a person
he is set at Houston, though. I'd love to hire him, but he is so rooted in Houston. Like he's not leaving.
And he said that, I don't care what big jobs come open. This is where I'm at. And he's an older guy, and I think he's tired of moving. And he went through that stuff at IU, which if you look back on is absolutely absurd in today's landscape, that the man got fired for that. But I think, you look at someone that age who's gone through that stuff in the past and is now at a not a smaller school, but a different type of school, and is comfortable there. And I just don't see him ever entertaining going anywhere else.
So I don't know if anybody on here wants to jump on here. I can provide a link. If you do, just jump on, provide your thoughts about this whole situation, because this is a weird time. It's the weird, awkward getting a divorce, but you're not going to court yet. Paperwork is being worked on. I don't know when they're going to file it, which in the metaphorical sense is, I don't know when the coaching staff will move on. Is it going to last until the end of the year? But I don't know. I think everybody's got a lot of thoughts on it. So just let me know if somebody wants to hop on here and just give their take, kind of like you would on a call-in show. If not, that's fine. You just keep listening to us. I mean, we're the kind of dudes we talk all day about this. We talk all day on a live chat with each other, me and Pat and a bunch of other people about Louisville sports. So it's easy to do. When people say, how do you keep content going for so long? Well, it's pretty easy when you're obsessed with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but you can also hop on with, some people might be in their PJs or something. You can hop on without your camera too. You don't have to show yourself or anything. So yeah, if you've got any input, we
Connor was naked when he was on here with us. That's why he had it pitch black. That's why he wasn't on here.
We would have lost a lot of subscribers.
Made the whole damn thing awkward.
Yeah. For sure.
He said he's still listening, so I'm sure he got a chuckle out of that, or he didn't. But yeah, I just, and I don't think we can undersell just how bad of a team Depaul is. So what I saw today, like that first 10 or 15 minutes, especially, like it's just like neither team could just get out in front of the other. That game was there not only for the taking, but for an ass kicking. And all we had to do is put a few sets together and score at a few series in a row where we could actually get the ball in the bucket, and we just could not score. We could not score. And then they, when they went zone, it was over, man.
It was over. Well, and like Ethan did this on his show, but I'm going to take a page out of his book. Let's talk about Depaul and who they have lost to this year. Fort Wayne at home. I think it's Purdue Fort Wayne at home by 8 points.
By 8 points.
Long Beach State at home by 6 points or 4 points. San Francisco at home by 16 points. I mean, you were talking about, I mean, and I think you've said this, Kyle, maybe not on the pod, but you are looking at our team from last year. When you look at those, when you look at those results, man, that is
us last year, absolutely.
And
what that say about us.
we just lost to ourselves from last year. Is essentially
what that say about us. Yeah. And we've gotten lucky in a couple of games, man. At UMBC game, we absolutely hacked them at the end when they were up 1, and they should have been at the foul line up 1 with 2 seconds left to go. Instead, we hacked them, and then he tips the ball, and we slam it in, and the rest is history. We win by 1. The New Mexico State game, they lose their best player. Lose their best player right before our game, and crazy comeback just to squeak it out against them. And some Bellarmine lost their best player right before our game, and we beat them by 5 points or something like that. Was a close game. And I mean, there were times in that game where we are just not nearly where we need to be with this roster. I mean, realistically, I really had us winning about 13 to 15 games with this roster, but I assumed that in this stretch here, we would have lost the 2 games up in New York and maybe one other gimme game. And so we'd have 3 losses right now, and we'd be 5-3 or whatever. What are we? 5-4? Yeah, 6-3. We would be 6-3 instead of 4-5. And it's like you look at that and you're like, well, that's not a huge discrepancy until you realize, oh shit, it's about to get really difficult after these next 2 games. Obviously, we play UK after those 2 games coming up. And that's another reason why I think the timing of this, if you're going to do it, needs to be now. Because you've got 2 teams that you can beat if you can just rally and get the players all to be motivated. Maybe some more fans show up and show out. Like I said, we're not going to get anywhere close to the crowds we were used to under Patino, but we can get a few more, we can get a couple thousand more in there to fill out the Yum, and the fans will be more invested, more enthusiastic because they'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. You want to do that against 2 teams like what we have coming up next. You don't want to do it right before UK. And if you don't do it before UK, then it's just probably not going to happen. And we're going to be stuck with it because now you're going to get in the conference play. And I mean, who wants to see that? Who really wants to see this drag all the way out that long? This is the time to do it. The timing made sense after Bellarmine, but we ended up winning that game. the timing makes sense now.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure. Like Awesome Lawson, I see Billy Donovan. I don't think we already talked about how I do not think he'd come here at all. But I'm also not sure Billy Donovan is the guy he was when he was at Florida.
Well, it's a completely different landscape, man.
He's been like
Completely different.
12, 13 years removed at least from this, if not longer. And in the landscape, as you were saying, Pat, it's NIL, it's transfer portal. These are all brand new things. And there is no guarantee at all that he would even – I'm not saying he's a bad coach by any means, and I'm not saying he would fail if he returned to college, but I don't think it's a slam dunk others do, and I definitely don't think a Pitino disciple who is really close with Rick Pitino until the day he dies and even onward after that based on legacy, like he's always going to be loyal to Rick. And if Rick doesn't – I mean, if he calls Rick and says, I'm leaving NBA or I'm going to get fired, so what about Louisville? What do you think? I just can't imagine a scenario behind the scenes where Rick Pitino's like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I can't see
Well,
it.
and kind of back to what you were saying about the timing here.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to talk about the UK game, because how I am envisioning this right now is about as embarrassing as it can get. You're going to see here in 3 games a Yum Center
covered in blue,
with more blue than red, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
With our on bench director of operations, whatever you call it, grandson in the starting lineup for our rival. I mean, well, what is Milt Wagner going to do when his grandson's announced? I mean, I can see him sitting there clapping for the other. It's as embarrassing as it can get, and I'm not saying that you can change all that right now, because who knows? I mean, ticket sales have probably already happened, but I do think that with a change, you will see that support and the fans being like, "Well, we're not going to let this happen." You'll see that more so if you make that change, like you said, very soon. I'll tell you right now, if and I don't mean this as a vendetta, but if Kenny Payne is not our coach, in the next few days, I'll buy a few tickets to the UK U of L game.
Funny you say that. I was just going to say, now I actually pulled it up and I'm looking. It's a Thursday night. That's tough for me because I live about an hour and 15 minutes north, and I'll be working Friday. But I will say this: I will do everything in my power to make that game if we move on from this staff. And that might sound petty, the wrong person, like, well, why wouldn't you just go anyway? Well, because I'm not going to pay money to watch Kenny Payne smile and laugh it up with John Calipari at the end of that game, while there's, in a 22,000 seat Yum Center, there's 16,000 UK fans. I'm not doing it. So at least if you move on and show the initiative and give a little bit of fanfare with an interim staff, I will do everything in my power to make that game. There's going to be tickets unless the UK fans have, swallowed them all up by now. There will be tickets. I will do everything in my power to make that game, but not with him as the coach. Absolutely not. I'm not going to sit there and watch the CATS chant, 80% plus UK fans invading our arena, getting their asses whipped, which is probably going to happen anyway. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I'll at least go out there and support those players and the interim staff, knowing that, like, it's not KP's best bud, that they're just yucking it up, having a good old time out there. I don't want to see that. It makes me sick to even think about it. I actually didn't watch the game last year because I knew that's probably exactly what he did in a handshake line. I'm not saying, you're a good sport. You shake hands and all that, but you just like to see, like, a guy who really looks like he takes the game personally. Yeah. Pitino, as bad as he was against Calipari at time, you knew it ate him up. He shook his hand at the end, but you just knew it ate him up. So, like when we lost this year in football, it ate Coach Braum up. Coach Kenny Payne, do you think it really eats him up to lose that game? I really don't. If I'm being
I'm
honest.
not sure. I'm not sure what eats Kenny Payne up, man. From
I'm
his
not. Yeah,
demeanor, I'm not
yeah.
sure.
The Marquette coach, Anthony, you bring it up. The Shaka Smart would be great here. I would love it. Now I don't Ty, you can go ahead and part way. Actually your last comment. Ty, you can go on somewhere because I know what you're gonna say. But Shaka Smart would be great here. I just don't think Shaka's interested in leaving Marquette. I think it has less to do with not being interested in Louisville and more to do with him really liking where he's at. He's like an hour or two away from where he grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. He's out and he's got it rolling there. I just, for everything I've heard, he's happy there. But when you look at a guy who runs a very complex system, fast pace, amazing defense,
fun to watch.
pressure, fun to watch, what does it remind you of? Now, I'm not going to say the man's Rick Pitino. There is no other Rick Pitino. There's only one. But if you're looking for the closest damn thing you're going to find, that would be him. And I would love it. I would go crazy for it. Now that I've seen his system, I wasn't on a Shaka train when he was very interested when he was at Texas before we hired, I believe it was before we hired Mac.
Yeah.
I wasn't interested at all because of the system he was running. And I thought, well, you know what? If it was VCU Shaka, I probably would be. But he went away from that. Well, now he's back to that, and he's having successful results. I think this year he needs to make a big run in the tournament, but then also when you look at that, let's say he makes Final Four, Pat, what would be the incentive to leave a Final Four team? Right. And I mean, Marquette's a good school and a good conference. Yeah, they're a lesser name because they don't have football, but Marquette I'd argue Marquette's a top 25 basketball program of all time.
Oh,
closer to like 2025, maybe. They're definitely in that conversation towards the end. Now, I don't know. I guess you could argue anybody that's won a national championship is ahead of Marquette, unless they've won one. I don't know. I know Al McGuire. I don't know. I can't remember.
I don't think they've won one, and
but they're a good program. They're not.
Oh, I definitely think they're a top 25 program, like you said, of all time. I think when you look at Shaka too, and again, maybe he has some interest, but he's been into that pressure cooker.
That's
and
it.
I know it's not Texas football, but they still care about their basketball there. He's been into that pressure cooker at Texas. He obviously felt that pressure to change his system and recruit certain players and stuff like that.
Correct.
And now he's at a place where he's back to what he's doing. He's successful. Does he want to go back into the pressure cooker at the University of Louisville?
And that's exactly what the person told me. They said, why even take the chance? That's the way he thinks about it. And it wasn't even related. It's like when I asked, would he be interested in Louisville? I was told he's not interested in going anywhere. I wasn't including Louisville. It was like, why take that chance again? He tried it. Now, do I think we are the same as Texas? No. Do I think we would limit his recruiting a certain type of player to fit a system that he has to recreate? No, I don't think we would do that. I think we'd say, hey, do what you're doing, man. But can I see where a guy who's comfortable being in his home state with a good program in a great conference, could I see where he would say, why would I even take that chance? Absolutely, I could see that. It makes perfect sense that he would probably be a bit hesitant to do that. So I really do think the main three names as of today we're looking at are, Jerome Tang, Dusty May, and outside chance with Mick Cronin, pending, how in the world we would get around his Elon Musk buyout money.
Yeah. And let's we kind of hit on it Wednesday, but we should talk about Tang and his current situation.
Oh yeah, good point.
K-State, and Kyle, you've done the research more than I have, but there's a definite wedge rife there between Tang and the university. And what happened? The name's escaping me, but their center, who is one of the most talented centers in the country, basically being kicked out of the university, not by Tang,
Tomlin.
but
No, I
by
think his name's Naquan Tomlin or Naquan. I don't
Naquan.
know which one he spelled.
Yeah,
Naquan. Yeah, and he was a big part of their run last year.
yeah, and you know the you can tell. I mean, the kid was kicked out of the university by the president. The athletic director, not Tang, makes the announcement, which is the big red flag to me that something is not right. You've got protests down there. You've got supposedly the president talking about wanting to suspend another player that drove Naquan to those protests. I mean, it sounds like a mess that.
Oh yeah, all kind of stuff. Sounds like the president's kind of like what we were dealing with. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna get into that. That being said, like it sounds like a little bit of overstepping, and I don't think the athletic director, who they have a really good athletic director, Kansas State does, and I feel like he's had about enough. And so yeah, that can only mean bad things. Like, maybe Jerome Tang decides he wants to stick it out there, but this cannot help matters at all.
No.
I'll tell you right now, there was already the idea that Jerome Tang would be at least very interested in sitting down and talking about this job before all that happened. So, I don't know if it would have gone all the way. It could be like, I'm interested to start a historical program. He may leave and say, you know what, I want to stay at K-State. But the interest was there on back channels, at least, that, hey, we're going to talk about it and it's possible. And then, we'll see. But now you look at the situation he's in. I mean, it certainly can't help their cause to have internal strife with the athletic director, the president, and of course the coach, who ultimately was affected because one of his best players was dismissed. And the way he was dismissed was just completely odd, because it was like he was cleared of some of the wrongdoing he was accused of, and the other stuff, like he did his time, and it looked like he was going to be back. All of a sudden he's back on the bench. He's celebrating with his teammates, and he's about to start playing again. All of a sudden, president comes in and says, "Nope, get him out of here," and just jumped the chain of command completely, and then sent the AD out there to give a statement. So the Jerome Tang thing is interesting to look at, especially considering the AD they have is one of the better ones in the country.
Right.
I don't know.
There's definitely, you look at Tang and what are the pluses when you look at, you stack those up. I mean, the man, for one, this isn't the biggest thing, but he's got that swagger. He's got the, I think he can communicate with our fan base and get that excitement back into the program. He's got in his couple years at Kansas State, he's absolutely attacked the portal, which is key to one, no matter who you are, that's key in today's college basketball society landscape. And also for us who need something good to happen in year one of our next coach, it's key to have some guy who's going to go out there and build a team through the portal to try to get us to the tournament. So, those are two big positives. I mean, also working with another guy that people have brought up, Scott Drew, that we talked about earlier, is a big thing.
How's Baylor doing this year? I'm curious, because last year they didn't do terrible, but they weren't great. And I'm just curious. And the reason I ask is because I'm going to look them up right now. But, I know like Tang was there for almost all of that run. And, sometimes the assistant is overhyped and it's because the head coach was so good. But there's other times where, like Oklahoma with Brent Venables and then Clemson with Dabo, it kind of works the other way. Ty says Baylor's legit this year. Well, I think they're number 6. They're kicking ass. 6. All right, so they're probably fine. So Scott Drew. That's probably he's probably wrong, but that doesn't mean Jerome Tang isn't a good candidate. I do get the hesitancy some have, because like, hey, he was good last year. It was his first year. Are we really going to roll the dice? based on one good year. I understand. I mean, I'm not going to argue that. I do understand that idea. I will say he is 8-2 without two of his best players playing. Now, one of those players is now dismissed from the team, so he's not coming back. But they also had a guard that's been injured. I think they expect back soon. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think he's been back yet. But I mean, they had a big win at LSU, which I don't think LSU is great this year, but they're not terrible. He had a good win there. He's 8-2 right now. We'll see if he can make another run. But here's what I do know about Jerome Tang. Two very positive things. Portal recruiting is not going to be a problem with Jerome Tang. Remember when Eric Musselman, we'd all laugh. It became a running joke that like he offered everybody, but like he had like telepathy, like he knew as soon as his Musselman senses went off, as soon as somebody was even thinking about entering a portal, that son of a bitch has got somebody knocking on their damn door saying, "Hi, here's a pamphlet. Check us out, read some information about us. Reach out if you want to join the Arkansas basketball team. We have 35 open scholarships left. We have like 6 5-star point guards, 3 5-star shooting guards, 6 center and power forwards. They're all 5 stars too. But hey, we've still got like 40 spots left because they just offer everybody. And then, meanwhile, we're sitting there on the sidelines wondering why we aren't even going after Davion McKnight at all. And then it's like, oh, Danilo pops up out of left field. Hey, Danilo's here. He's here. That's our big guy. That's our big play right now. He's the one stops under Jerome Tang. Jerome Tang is that dude who can crash the portal, hit it hard, and he's got swagger. He's got charisma. You remember UK? They didn't have those dudes. And I know we don't ever hire a coach just based on beating UK, but he said it. He said they don't have those dudes. Went out there and spanked their ass like they're freaking out, disobedient toddler at daycare. And just I'm all for
some swag behind it.
Backup auction. I would say for me, Mick Cronin, number 1, Jerome Tang, Tang Gang, number 2.
Yeah, I'd agree. Just to go back to Danilo, man, I think that might be the one person in the portal that Arkansas didn't contact. So
maybe that's what we did. We were like,
yeah.
Let me find everybody that Eric Musselman hasn't contacted so that we can bring him to Louisville.
Yeah. Also, this is somewhat inside here, but Connor, man, I think based off of your portal presence, man, you need to go and interview with Eric Musselman, man. I mean, I think you'd be an asset to that, man. You hang out on the portal all day long, man. You could be the guy contacting all the dudes for Eric Musselman.
That's a lot of work to keep up with Muss in the portal. Woo.
Well, dude, I mean, you're in the Discord, man. I mean, I go away for 10 minutes and Connor's got 20 portal dudes.
He's on top of that stuff. Pause.
But no, yeah, to your point, I agree. Cronin number 1, Tang number 2. I guess, if we're talking of those 3, Mays number 3, who we haven't really hit on.
Yeah, we can talk about him. Why not?
And my thing here, for one, there's a couple. I mean, you talk about people have a hesitancy with Tang and his limited experience.
Mm-hmm.
May's kind of there too. I mean, he's been in the head coaching game longer, but the success is last year and this year with the same team he had last year.
Same team, and that's like it means he can retain guys and he's got them bought in. But it took him so long. Like if you look at what he did, which I will say this, Dusty May took over an FAU team that was in the absolute shitter, and he was able to get them like 15-15, 17-15, and that was an improvement. But then it's like it took so long to get over that hump. When you look at, and if look at it, there's a lot of 17 and 15s in there. If y'all don't believe me, go look at his Wikipedia or wherever you want to look to see his coaching history. And my thing about Dusty May is I would be okay with Dusty May, but the reason he's not up there with those other two for me, and this is just my opinion, is for some of the reasons we just alluded to, but also Dusty May is an IU alum, big time IU guy, like big time. And, Medicare Mike Mike Woodson, Medicare Mike, he's up there in age, man. So Medicare Mike's going to be cashing out his AARP supplement soon. And when that happens, he's hitting the retirement.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen within the next few years. And what do you think we're going to have to deal with if he's successful? One of two things happens. Either A, he's not very good here, and then IU says, oh, you guys can keep him. We don't want him now. Or B, he kills it here for like 3 years, and then all of a sudden we're in the same predicament again, trying to find a coach.
Right.
I'm not, you can never guarantee a guy will go somewhere. But, I mean, it's as close to guarantee as you can get with a guy. He could fall in love with our city and decide to stick around. But, I mean, it's just, I guess when I look at Jerome Tang, I'm looking at a guy who, he was a assistant for years under Scott Drew, went to K-State. He's in his mid-50s. I think if he comes here, we are a destination job for the right coach. I think he's a guy that would probably stick around and not want to make another move if he has a few successful years here, and I could see him settling down. Now, maybe he doesn't, but I could see it much more likely. And Mick Cronin, from what I understand, is dying to get back to this area, enjoyed his time as an assistant coach at Louisville, understands what it means to run a successful program at Louisville based on coaching under Pitino, and he's not as attached to that Pitino tree as some of the other Pitino guys, because that's not really the primary coach he worked under. I'm pretty sure, somebody correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, I'm pretty sure he's more of a Bob Huggins guy. Now, I'm not saying Mick Cronin doesn't support Rick Pitino or that they don't get along. I'm saying Mick does his own thing, goes his own way. So, and his family is from around this area, as Ty just said. So I think it's very possible if the money thing works out, and I would love to see it. And I think he would stay. I don't think he would jump around and go to other places either. Dusty May, that's the biggest hang up I have with him besides is he really going to be a consistently good coach without these kind of dudes he has now? Credit to him. I mean, he's done a good job there. He just strikes me as a guy. It may take a while, and by the time he gets it rolling, all of a sudden he goes to wear candy stripes.
Yeah. I mean, I think as perfect as it can get analogy for Dusty May is he is IU's basketball version of Jeff Brom.
Yes.
Jeff Brom coaches at the Western Kentucky University. We weren't in the position to hire somebody anyway, but we weren't going to hire Jeff Brom from WKU. So, but we were all interested to see, okay, when Jeff Brom goes up to that Power 5 level, what does he look like? And Purdue had to know, okay, if this guy's successful here, eventually Louisville's going to come calling. And we came calling twice. They kept him the first time around. But do we want to be the Purdue, for Dusty May to IU, and don't get me wrong, if Dusty May's here for 4 years and we're going to freaking a Final Four or two, then I don't care. That would be awesome. But there's so much risk there because that's not the only thing that could happen. Like you said, he could be bad and then IU doesn't matter because he's bad. So it's kind of one of those things like you either get him and he's bad or you get him for 4 good years. And I'd rather take the risk and have somebody who wants to be here for 10, 15 good years. So that would be, and I'm sure you're the same way, Kyle, that would be why he would be probably number 3 on my list of those guys. Yeah, and as Kyle's mentioned, the list is going,
it'll change
4 months away from 4 or 5 months away from hiring a coach. The list is going to change. People are going to fall off. People are going to become not interested. We're going to find somebody else that we think is the next big thing. So this is kind of the initial look, but it's not going to be the final list by any means, I don't think so.
All right. I will say this, please like and subscribe. Like the content if you haven't already. If you hit that like button, just think of it as an extra $1 million that goes into the buyout money we will need for a new coach. So every like is important. Every single one of them. We need all the help we can get financially to get ourselves a big fish out there. Pat, I wanted to see, we've talked a lot about these things. I want to see if you had anything else on your mind, or you want to talk about anything else, or.
No, I mean, I think we've covered the men's basketball program. I think
What happens,
again, yeah. Tomorrow we support the women.
Yep. Lady
it shouldn't be
good.
It shouldn't be a tough game. Kentucky's women's program's kind of in shambles right now, but it's a rivalry game. We always want to win it. If there's one coach that's been here for a long time that freaking has dominated the UAK rivalry, it is Jeff Waltz. Coach McDonald's done a pretty good job too, but Jeff Waltz has absolutely dominated it, and hopefully Brom can follow suit eventually. But if you're like me and you I got a wife who roots for Kentucky, and she's very
no, I'm not like you.
But when we lose to Kentucky in something that semi matters, it hurts. So I'm thankful for Jeff, and I'm looking forward to a rivalry win tomorrow on that.
My wife was a UK fan. After every game, we'd have to talk about a renegotiated buyout of the marriage.
Yeah. My wife's good, man. I give my wife credit, man. She does not.
Must be an amazing woman for you to look past that. That's all I can say, man.
She doesn't talk shit after UK games. So.
All right. Well, it's been good. It's been good to talk about. I can't say the circumstances themselves have been great, but it's always good to get on here, hear your all's feedback as well. Just get on here and talk. Agree or disagree with my crazy takes and inopportune dad jokes. All that aside, we're all Louisville fans here, and we're all hoping that, one way or another, this resolves itself and we can get back to our winning ways. With that being said, if you haven't subscribed, you like the content, please subscribe to the channel. We'll come on every Wednesday at 9, as long as there's not a game that interferes with it. And then we also do these post-game episodes every once in a while. So that being said, I think we're going to hang it up tonight. I know Ross was going to be on here tonight. I saw a couple of people ask. His electricity went out. Thoughts and prayers to anybody dealing with electricity issues. I know some people down south, if you live kind of close in southern Kentucky or the Tennessee area, are dealing with tornadoes. Thoughts and prayers to you guys as well. That's a stressful situation that goes well beyond the stuff we talk about on here. So that being said, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Until next time, thank you for watching another episode of the Third Banner Pod. Go Cards.
Go Cards.